Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian stared at each other nervously, clearly thinking of the same thing. And to be fair, no one wants this, but the situation was unavoidable and they were desperate. Tianhai City has such attractive resources, which will definitely cause competition from factions in other cities. So they might as well join a force that knows them well. The two agreed to Zhang Yi's request, knowing full well that by joining Zhang Yi, they can continue to stay in Tianhai City and enjoy certain rights at least. In the future, we will do whatever you ask us to do. I just hope you can protect the people in our base and let everyone survive. Xiao Honglian made a respectful request since the outcome of the battle ahead will be primarily based on Zhang Yi's strength. Xing Tian smiled nervously, his tone a bit hesitant as he added, "Old friend, we had a good relationship in the past. You won't treat me badly, right?" Zhang Yi smiled and replied, casually waving a hand. "On ordinary days, you can do what you want and I won't interfere. But on major matters, you have to listen to my instructions." Zhang Yi didn't say too much. After all, his requirements for the three forces were not high. And he knew that no matter how many requirements were put forward, if these guys really encountered major problems, they would always take their own interests as the starting point. What Zhang Yi really wants was their unwavering loyalty during this battle. The kind that's so ridiculous that it doesn't even exist and it's impossible to have. Zhang Yi knows this, and quite frankly, he's not expecting much from either forces. Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian nodded. Then the two proceed to take their men to leave the Zaimaishan subway station. "Okay, we understand and we'll take our leave first." Chun Jingguan, with his cheerful demeanor, also said his farewell to Zhang Yi. "Boss, we're also leaving too and we'll wait for your instructions." Zhang Yi took out all the vehicles from his alternate space, and everyone took theirs back to their respective base. However, the atmosphere along the way back to the shelter was a little bit solemn. After all, the leisurely days had passed and everyone felt the shift in the cold air. If there are no unexpected accident in the meantime, an expected conflict with other cities will soon occur. Why do we always have to fight? It's so tiring. Chunlei sighed, looking a bit annoyed. This is the general trend after the end of the world. There is nothing we can do about it. Uncle Yu replied, looking a bit dejected just thinking about the current state of the world. A society without civilization follows Darwin's law, the strong prey on the weak, which is inevitable. We can only hope that the Jiangnan region will establish more sound and comprehensive laws as soon as possible to restrain these forces. Zhang Yi sat in the co-pilot seat, listening to the conversation between the two. He briefly pondered over Uncle Yu's words and said confidently, "After this battle, the city will be much more peaceful and we can be at ease." Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with a faint light and his sinister signature smile immediately tugged on his lips. For a moment there, his calm and composed demeanor briefly gave way to his deepest animalistic desire. He could not treat the humiliation of those guys in Days City as nothing. He leisurely stated that normally killing the chicken to scare the monkeys has always been the way to set an example for others. But this time, he was not only going to kill the chickens but collapse all the entire chicken coops as well. The scene shifts to the shelter about half an hour later. Inside at the lounging hall, Yang Xinxin, Yang Min, and Zhou Haimei were patiently waiting like any other day for the group's arrival. Unexpectedly, the three women hadn't been informed ahead of time that the group were on their way back. Holding a cup of hot tea, Yang Xinxin stated that she didn't know how Zhang Yi and the others were doing in Blizzard City. Yang Min was at the window, staring outside with longing. They should be back in the next few days, right? Coincidentally, she heard the sound of a car the moment she said those words. Surprised, she told her sister and Zhou Haimei about what she heard. Yang Xinxin placed her cup of tea on the table and replied skeptically that it was impossible. To put both women at ease, Zhou Haimei suggested they go take a look to be sure. The three women headed for the door, but the moment they got there, the sudden noise at the other end made them halt in their tracks, realizing that the group had indeed arrived. They waited anxiously to greet them the moment they opened the door, and that's what happened seconds after as the group made their way inside the shelter. Leading the charge was, of course, Zhang Yi, and Yang Xinxin immediately bolted forward to give him a hug. "Big brother, you are back." Her welcoming hug was momentarily cut short with a gentle tap on the shoulder from Zhou Haimei. "Xinxin, let's make way for them first. It's cold outside. Let them come in and have some hot tea to warm themselves up." Holding a tray of several freshly hot-prepared tea, Zhou Haimei began to serve everyone with a radiant smile the moment they gathered at the lounging hall. She noticed the forced smile on Uncle Yu's face when she served him, and couldn't help asking with some worry when she took a seat beside him. "What happened to you? Since you came back, your expression had been quite serious." "Oh, it's no big deal." Zhang Yi replied to her question before Uncle Yu could. You guys have to stay in the shelter for a while because in Blizzard City, many forces think that our Tianhai City is weak and want to swallow up our territories. Zhang Yi and the others had not been away for long, and nothing happened at home. Everything was as calm as before. But after hearing Zhang Yi and the others talk about their experience in Blizzard City, Zhou Haimei and Yang Min showed helpless expressions on their faces. There's going to be a war again. Why can't we live a good life? Why do we have to fight to the death? I really don't understand what those people are thinking. Zhou Haimei shook her head with a look of regret. It seems that she was condemning those who did not cherish the good life and had to fight for their lives. Uncle Yu put his arm around her shoulders and comforted her with a smile. Don't worry. No matter how big the problem is, we will always take care of it. You just need to focus and do your own work at home and don't worry about anything else. Zhang Yi turned to Yang Xinxin next to him on the sofa and started to arrange tasks directly. Xinxin, I have taken over the 3 forces in Tianhai City. You will immediately take over their network systems. Through this, I can keep abreast of the developments in various areas of Tianhai City at any time. Yang Xinxin nodded slightly. Okay, big brother. In addition to that, I can also try to invade the network systems of other cities. Zhang Yi was stunned for a moment and stared at her with a surprised look. Can you do that too? Yang Xinxin smiled and nodded. In the past, it was because it was not necessary. After all, our main opponent was in Tianhai City. But now, the forces threatening our safety have become forces in other cities, so it is necessary to do this. Except for the network of Blizzard City, to which I dare not touch casually. The rest cannot be regarded as such. As long as the networks of other cities are not internal network systems, I can crack them. Although in the end of the world, the network system has not completely collapsed. There are still 6 national-level transcendent forces that maintain these infrastructures for the national economy and people's livelihood. Most forces are inseparable from communication equipment and the central control system, so they have to rely on the network, and there will be flaws that Yang Xinxin will find and take advantage of. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with excitement. Then you need to try to invade the network system of Days City. I want to get their combat power information, preferably the information about the supernatural powers of the mutants. Yang Xinxin smiled slightly and mimicked her friend's actions. Leave this to me. And speaking of such friend, Zhang Yi turned his gaze towards her and asked, Karen, you have been exposed to a lot of things in Blizzard City recently. The black and white battle suit and the building materials are some examples of them. I believe you absorb them well, but the most urgent thing is to replicate that kind of battle suit. Zhang Yi was very envious of the training clothes in the martial arts field. This was the first time he had seen clothing that could improve a person's basic physical fitness through clothing. It was probably similar to a human exoskeleton, something Zhang Yi had only seen on the internet and in movies. However, it was the first time he had seen human exoskeleton technology developed to the level of clothing. With this thing, the overall strength of their team would be greatly improved. Even for the few women who were not good at fighting, it would give them a little more life security. Got it. Lu Karen saluted playfully. Zhang Yi then turned to Yang Min. Your work has to continue, and the more supernatural food you store, the better. Yang Min smiled brightly and nodded coquettishly. I know about this and haven't slacked off during this period. Zhang Yi nodded approvingly and gave her a thumbs up. That's great. Keep it up. The team must always be ready for battle. So everyone should get some rest and prepare for a new battle in the best condition. The meeting finally came to an end and the preparations were soon set in motion. The next day, Zhang Yi was startled awake by the blaring sound of the shelter AI system, informing everyone of an intruder. He immediately got up with his phone in hand. On the surveillance footage on his phone, he saw 2 black armored vehicles through the monitoring footage. He zoomed in the signature badge on the vehicle. He immediately guessed that these trespassers were from other cities because he had never seen the logo on the armored vehicle before. Zhang Yi quickly changed into his combat uniform and walked out of the room. He went downstairs, where Liang Yu and Uncle Yu were patiently waiting, dressed and ready for action. Let's go and see what's going on. As they head for the door, Liang Yu stated that the group was very cautious and stopped 200 meters away from the shelter. And judging from their car logo, they are not locals. I know they must be people from Days City. After all, they are the closest city to us. Uncle Yu frowned. Are they here to declare war? Declare war? Zhang Yi looked back at Uncle Yu with amusement. Have you ever seen anyone who is so martial and tells you in advance that he is going to war with you before it really breaks out? Hearing this, Uncle Yu was a bit puzzled and asked if they were really from Days City. If they were, then what do they want with this kind of invasion? Zhang Yi smiled playfully. Amused with the mental coercion the enemy was adapting. They should be here to intimidate us and make us surrender without a fight. After hearing what Zhang Yi said, The expressions on Uncle Yu and Liang Yu's faces were very strange. They couldn't make sense of the enemy's reason for trying to persuade them to surrender. It really doesn't make sense during this apocalyptic era. After all, no matter how serious the collapse of Tianhai City is, there are still some residual mutant forces with armed capabilities. If a fight to the death really breaks out and they are forced into a desperate situation, no one will have a good ending. Not to mention that now, Zhang Yi's strength had undergone a qualitative change that no one dares to openly say that they can beat him. Not even the strongest people in Blizzard City. On the other hand, his team is not weak either. They could win against the full-scale attacks of multiple bases a few months ago. It's really a fool's errand to intimidate them to make them surrender. Zhang Yi's mouth still had that playful smile. He told his team to pay no mind because their worry was needless. Anyway, let's go and see where their confidence comes from. Zhang Yi and his team passed by the lounging area, and the others in the shelter were already waiting for them. With Zhang Yi there, they have a backbone. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. What are you all looking at? It's okay, just go about your own business. Flower jumped onto Zhang Yi's shoulder and purred a little to get comfortable. Uncle Yu and Teacher Liang, just follow me. They were just a group of minions, so why do you guys look like you're so embarrassed? This look would seem that we are afraid of them. Zhang Yi slowly opened his right hand in front of him and activated his dimensional shield. An invisible and intangible round shield appeared in front of the three people, just enough to block all directions around them. Zhang Yi now has 3 defensive uses for the dimensional gate. The dimensional gate has the largest defense range and the strongest defense, but it cannot be moved. The dimensional shield, however, has a small defense range and medium defense, but it can be used flexibly and is suitable for close defense. And the 2 Realms Absolute has the smallest defense range, but can form an all-round defense without dead angles, and the spherical characteristics distort the dimensional gate, resulting in absolute defense. He needs to choose these abilities carefully according to the situation. With the preparations in order, the 3 walked through the shelter's entrance, stepped outside and walked on the narrow corridor, then down the flight of stairs to the snowy ground. They walked slowly towards the 2 black armored vehicles on the snow. Zhang Yi, as cautious as ever, reminded the 2 to be careful and never let their guard down. The moment they got closer to the vehicle, the atmosphere tensed up as each side took a moment to assess the situation before any further action. In the car over in front of them, there were 10 fully armed soldiers, all of whom were also extraordinary mutants, watching the entire surroundings cautiously. During the previous gathering, they had already seen that the major forces in Tianhai City were headed by Zhang Yi, so the car drove directly to the vicinity of the shelter. Seeing Zhang Yi and his men coming over, a sturdy mutant with a beard reported to the rest leisurely. They are coming. A companion leaned over to the vehicle's window and casually took a look. He lets out a heavy sigh, and with an expression of looking bored replied arrogantly, "They look so weak. Just hurry up and give the letter to them, and then we will go back. Don't waste time in this kind of place." A skinny guy in the back seat leaned an arm on the vehicle's window and replied with a mocking smile, "It's a rare opportunity to come here, so don't be so anxious. After all, this will be our territory in the future." Another guy behind him crossed his arms and also spoke arrogantly, stating that he hopes Zhang Yi and his team would know better and be more sensible to give up the territories of Tianhai City quickly. They chatted casually and did not take Zhang Yi and his men seriously, because they all believed that Tianhai City had been defeated long ago, and the remaining strength was completely unable to fight against the 3 major organizations in Day City. Zhang Yi and his men walked up to them. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Zhang Yi asked in a deep voice. The bearded man in the lead narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Yi. "Are you Zhang Yi?" Zhang Yi nodded. The bearded man reached out to take out a brown paper file bag from his pocket. "We are from Day City, and we are the messengers of the 3 major forces there. The leaders of our 3 forces have a letter for you, and I hope you will read it carefully." He handed the file bag to Zhang Yi and reminded him, "By the way, there is also a contact information on it. Once you figure it out, send an email to this address." Zhang Yi and his team stared at the letter from Days City expressionlessly.